Welcome back everyone to the video, and today we're doing our too early 2024 wide receiver rankings. And so I did this for quarterbacks. If you didn't see that video, go check it out. The comments on that one were pretty mixed as far as you guys agreeing and disagreeing. I do want to address just one thing though. I did a terrible job of actually explaining the honorable mentions categories. By the way, I'm not sure why it's cropped like that. It will not fix itself, and I just can't be bothered to keep trying to fix it. But anyway, for that last video, I chose 3 players to put in the honorable mentions category. I'll be doing the same thing for this video, but I would like to say whenever we get to that point, just because I have 3 players on there does not mean that another wide receiver that might not be listed, I don't also see in the same category, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to keep the list relatively short because it is supposed to be a top 10 list after all. I don't want to include too many players. So, if I have like, I'll use people that aren't on the list. So if I had like, Juju, who I put in the honorable mentions category, and then, okay, let me just choose someone else. Odell was, not listed, but you guys thought that they were pretty similar. That doesn't mean I don't have them listed. I just didn't want to include them and make the honorable mentions category 7 players long, if that makes sense. So just because I leave them off does not mean I don't see them around the same way. Because really, 7 through like 11 or 17 through like 11, those wide receivers are all pretty close in my opinion and have a case for being around like that 15 to 13 kind of number. So yeah, I just want to get that out of the way first. I think we're going to do this the same way we did the last one. So starting with the final tier and then doing number 10 through 6 and then 5 through 1 and then finishing with the honorable mentions category. So you're probably wondering why I have a category called Puka. Puka Nacua is not featured on this tier list. He's not on it. So I did just want to throw that on there because he deserves to be talked about after his year. As far as a top 10 ranking for him, I don't think I'd put him in a top 10 list. However, I would like to say that I also feel like it's pretty hard to rank him going into next year because when you have a year like that on a roster with another really good wide receiver like Cooper Kupp, it's hard to kind of tell what their volume might look like in the following season. Does he get more work than Cooper Kupp? Does he get maybe less work? Does it even out? I don't really know, but I have to mention him because he had a historic season. He's an amazing wide receiver. So just because he is not listed in this, it's because I can't include him. His picture is not on here, but he's still an amazing player. I had to mention him. So getting that out of the way, we'll just skip over that. So now 10 through 6. And again, this is going to change a lot across the offseason, okay? So just because I'm doing this now doesn't mean next August it'll be the same. And honestly, I'm doing it before free agency and then, after free agency, after the draft. So it's going to change based on that player situation on their team. So for me, number 10 is going to be DJ Moore. Some people might have him up higher. Some people might actually have him lower. I do think it is a little interesting, though, because we don't know for sure if the Bears are going to trade away the first overall pick or just keep Fields. And whatever they do will highly affect DJ Moore's usage next year because a rookie quarterback with Caleb Williams who's unproven might be a bit riskier to put DJ Moore as like a top 10 wide receiver, whereas Fields, we know what he can do, and we know that he utilized DJ Moore very well. So I'm ranking this because as of right now, Fields is the quarterback, so I'm ranking this as if Fields is the quarterback next year. And for that reason, I have DJ Moore there. I think he's a super underrated player, and I'm glad he honestly went to a team that he could be recognized on, like, the Bears, because the Panthers were just not a good spot for him. But yeah, he's number 10 for me. And then number 9 is going to be Mike Evans. Mike Evans, I mean, I think it's a big deal that he re-signed with Tampa. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see that coming. But again, him and Baker Mayfield were honestly great this past year. I do think it's going to be a bit of a loss for them losing their offensive coordinator to the Panthers, who is now their head coach. Because again, he's helped turn around Geno's career in Seattle. He helped Baker a ton last year in that offense. But I will say, I do think that Baker has kind of solidified himself in a nice role there in Tampa, assuming he re-signs, which I think he will. And assuming he does, he still has Mike Evans. I think they'll be able to have a good year next year as well. Mike Evans, amazing wide receiver, definition of consistent. He's number 9. And then this is a really risky one because, as I've said for the first 2, the quarterback situation also will heavily affect their usage and their performance. But next, I actually have Davante Adams, who's going to be number 8 for me. And the reason I'm making this a relatively risky pick is because Adams is an amazing wide receiver, but his time with the Raiders has not gone to plan for him at all. But I will say, I have a ton of faith in Antonio Pierce as the head coach. I think the Raiders made an awesome move promoting him, getting a new GM in there. So I have a lot of faith that they will make a nice move at quarterback to help benefit Davante Adams, because you can't let a player of that caliber go to waste. And I do think in the ideal situation, he is a better player than Mike Evans and DJ Moore. So I think, in my opinion, as of right now, and again, this is a guess. This really is a guess. We don't know who their quarterback is next year, really. Assuming they have a really nice move they make to put him in a better spot, I think he's going to be a top 8 wide receiver next year. And again, if they don't make that kind of move, if they make like a Jimmy Garoppolo move, it doesn't really help out, then Adams, might not be right there. But I do think they will do something to put him in a better spot than he was in this past year. And so he's going to be at number 8. And then number 7, who might be a bit further down than some people would actually like for him to be, but it's going to be A.J. Brown. And so the reason he is further down is because this year, I think, was a slight decline from the Super Bowl year. Again, I said this before in my quarterback video. I feel like a lot of that affected Hurts and that offense was on the coaching, not as much the players. I don't think you can blame Hurts solely for being the reason of that team's collapse. I mean, Hurts is a great player, but he can't make the chemistry sync how it was a year ago in an entirely new system that just might not benefit certain player skill sets. It doesn't work like that. I think that the offense this past year, too many screens, too many weird quarterback draw plays. I think it was just doing too much with something that was already working just fine. I think now they have Kellen Moore in there, it's going to be a lot better for him, get back on pace. And when they were, really clicking that Super Bowl season against Mahomes, they were looking very, very nice. I think A.J. Brown's an amazing wide receiver, and because we know his situation next year, I do have him above Davante Adams, but again, that stuff can definitely change. So, and I just want to say that overall, I understand you guys will disagree with a lot of this, and that is fine because we all have our own opinions, but for this list, it is going to change a lot. I'm doing this video literally once a month until the season comes around. So, the draft is going to affect this. Trades are going to affect this. Free agency is going to affect this. Any injuries and training camp is going to affect this. So I'm just throwing that out there. And then for number 6 for me is going to be Nico Collins. And so again, this might be too high for some people, but I really think Nico Collins deserves this spot. And this is a big spot for him to be in because it's above guys like Mike Evans, Davante Adams, A.J. Brown. But if you look at Houston and you look at what Stroud has done, what DeMeco Ryans has done, I mean, that culture completely shifted after 1 year. And Nico Collins is a great young wide receiver. He's great after the catch. He has great hands. He's a good playmaker. And Stroud is obviously unbelievable. He's great at getting him the ball and getting him spots to succeed. So I am putting Nico Collins number 6. I think he's going to have a massive year next year. I will say the only way his usage goes down, in my opinion, is if Tank Dell gets a bigger role once he's healthy again next year, which I could realistically see. But I do think, just based off how good Nico Collins is and really how good he fits that system with Stroud, I mean, I have to have him close to top 5 for next year because I think he really is just an amazing wide receiver. And again, Houston, their future is so unbelievably bright. So now we're getting to top 5. So number 5 for me is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's an amazing wide receiver. I think Jared Goff does a great job of getting him the ball. I think Goff's a great quarterback. I really do. I think they kind of bounce off each other, though, in a way of him helping Goff's life be a lot easier. Amon-Ra's ability to get open is, obviously very, very high. But also, Goff is able to really get him the ball, whether it's underneath or find him deep. I mean, they work very well together. They complement each other very, very well. I don't think one really, makes the other, if that makes sense. I think he's a great player, great wide receiver. I love Detroit. I'm glad they're really good again. I wish they could make the Super Bowl. But still, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a big part of that offense. He's an amazing wide receiver, and he is, next year, for my too early rankings, going to be top 5. And then number 4 for me is going to be Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase is an amazing wide receiver. The injuries really hurt the Bengals this past year on offense and on defense, especially for those bigger named guys like Joe Burrow, like T. Higgins, like DJ Reader. A lot of guys going through injuries throughout the season. But when Chase is healthy, when Burrow is healthy, they're one of the best duos in the entire NFL. I think next year, obviously assuming he's healthy, I think they get right back to that. I think Ja'Marr Chase is a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Potential, I think he's top 3. I really do. I think he's an amazing wide receiver. But just because there are some question marks as far as, Burrow getting back fully healthy and all that, I can't put him ahead of guys who I have above him, who we'll see in just a second. But they're 2 great receivers, and honestly, if you have them flip-flop, that's pretty valid too. All right, and so number 3 is going to be maybe a bit of a not riskier pick, but I don't know. That's up to you guys to decide. But I have CeeDee Lamb there. And I think CeeDee Lamb is an amazing wide receiver. And a little over a year ago, so last year I did like a mid-season wide receiver rankings, which I did very poorly for the record. They were not good rankings. But I will say I had CeeDee Lamb top 5. People did not like that. And at the time, you know what? He probably wasn't top 5. But I think that take has honestly aged relatively well. I think Lamb just keeps stepping up every single year, every single game. I mean, he went on a tear for fantasy football players especially, because I had him in fantasy football. I mean, he was getting like 30 points a game for like 5 games in a row for a time. He was going really crazy. He's a big part of that Cowboys offense that unfortunately kept short in the playoffs. But again, amazing wide receiver. He's definitely top 5 in my opinion. I think him and Dak did great this past year. It just didn't amount to anything more than it should have, unfortunately, for them. But I think Lamb is an amazing wide receiver, and he is number 3 for me. And then number 2 is going to be Tyreek Hill. A lot of people have him as number 1, and I mean, and look, if you have that, that is completely valid. Hill is an amazing athlete. I have him number 2. I think Tyreek Hill is incredible. I think he honestly had a shot at 2,000 yards this past year if he didn't stay, if he didn't get hurt, if he stayed healthy. Because he was on pace to really shatter it at like a certain point last year. Obviously, you know, kind of slowed down and stuff. And really the Dolphins as a whole got really banged up as the season went on. But Tyreek Hill, amazing wide receiver. He definitely helps Tua out a lot. And again, I mean, he's a massive part of that offense. So he is number 2. And number 1, who is the best wide receiver in the NFL when healthy, in my opinion, is Justin Jefferson. This guy missed like, 6-7 games and still got over 1,000 yards. I mean, absolutely unbelievable athlete. I do think had him and Kirk stayed healthy last year, Vikings could have made a lot more noise than what they did, because that Brian Flores defense it was a lot better than what I thought it would be. So again, Justin Jefferson, it seems like every play catches the ball to at least 20-25 yards. Amazing player, number 1 for me. That is my top 10. If you guys have things flipped around in there, perfectly valid. Like I said, you can kind of have a lot of different combinations of like the top 5 or even top 10 that I feel like are, you know, not that crazy at all. That's just how I would personally rank them. But so for the honorable mentions, now like I said, there were about 6 to 7 wide receivers I had down for honorable mentions, but obviously I only chose to highlight a few because I don't want to fill this entire thing up for a top 10 ranking. You know, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I do want to say, number 1, I'm going to put down Stefon Diggs. I think Diggs is an amazing wide receiver. Last year, he had a really hot start to the year, and then after, like, November, he didn't have a single game over 100 yards after that. So, you know, not ideal. He didn't have a whole lot of touchdowns after, I think it was either after November or after early December, I think. So he didn't finish the year great. I think Josh Allen really kind of took over and kind of helped them, you know, get out of the, you know, missing the playoffs, I guess, area they were in, and they, you know, ended up making the playoffs. I think Diggs is a great receiver. Wasn't as consistent as he's capable of being this past year. The reason I left him off the top 10 is because I feel like basically all of these guys are continuing to go up, with the exception of maybe Devontae Adams and Mike Evans. It's kind of like on the older side. But I do think Adams and Evans are arguably better on the same level as Stefon Diggs, and I feel like because I think DJ Moore is going to get better next year and get more usage, it kind of bumped Diggs out of the top 10 into the honorable mentions category. So that is why he is there. Number 2 player I want to mention is going to be Brandon Ayuk. I think he's an amazing wide receiver, and I'm very interested to see what happens to him as far as if he goes back to San Francisco or if he goes somewhere else. I do think, you know, he can be overlooked very easily in an offense where there's also Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Chris McCaffrey as an option. But Ayuk is an amazing player, and he has a lot of big plays for the 49ers. So I think he deserves the honorable mentions category. Although I will say, if you want to take him out, and also, actually, hold on, just a second for that. Hold on, I'm going to hold that thought. The other player I wanted to highlight is going to be Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper is an amazing wide receiver. I think next year it's going to be interesting what happens as far as, you know, Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson. Obviously, I think because you're paying Deshaun Watson that money, it has to be Deshaun Watson starting. How does that go for Amari Cooper? I don't really know, but I feel like he's oftentimes either almost underrated or overlooked. I think Amari Cooper is awesome, and he was a huge part of the Browns' success on offense this past season. So those are an example of 3 players I'd have on there. You could also take off Ayuk, and you could put on Pittman. I don't understand that. Pittman is an amazing wide receiver. He was very good this past year, and he really helped out Gardner Minshew. Another thing you could probably do is you could probably take out Amari Cooper. You could probably put in Keenan Allen. Or you could also probably take out Stefon Diggs and put in George Pickens. So that is kind of like what I'm talking about as far as the honorable mentions category. And for me, it's very kind of flexible as far as the players you put on there and players you take off of there. So again, I just want to highlight a few extra players, but for me, the ones I'm choosing to put on here is going to be Ayuk, it's going to be Cooper, and it's going to be Stephon Diggs. But again, if you guys have other players, even ones I didn't mention, comment those down below. Comment down below any players or rankings you disagree with. Because again, I completely understand it's very tough to rank wide receivers. I think the top 5 is relatively similar for everyone. I think the order is different, but I think it's usually the same players. 6 through 10 can be a bit more difficult, but again, this is a too early ranking. We don't know what these guys' offenses are going to look like, 6 months from now, whenever the season starts. So I did want to get this out there, though. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you did enjoy this video. Like I said, I'm doing this video along with quarterbacks like once a month until next season starts. I also do plenty of other team rankings and player ranking videos. We'll be doing draft content here very shortly, and then we'll also cover all kinds of team changes going into next year, player changes going into the next year. A lot of NFL content. I do Madden content as well. I do Madden videos. We do, gameplays, pack openings in my Spin series. Then also, all the way in July, when the college game comes out, I'm going to be doing videos on that as well. So, I guess we'll kind of cross that bridge when we come to it. That's going to do it for the ranking. Thank you guys for watching. I do really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.